All right, everyone, get ready for this. Today, we're taking a deep dive into the world of Donald Trump.
You know him, you love him, maybe you don't.
Yeah, specifically his legal issues, his business practices, all that. We're really trying to get a better understanding of the man behind all these headlines. And we've gathered a ton of sources here, right? Court documents, tons of articles, some going back decades. Oh, and even a film.
Yeah, it's a pretty diverse collection we got here, which I think will really help us get like a multi-dimensional view. I mean, these sources, they go all the way back to the 1918
Wow.
and then right up to, stuff from just this month, February 2025.
So recent. So, okay. You've probably heard about the legal charges against Trump, right? But have you ever really thought about just how many there are? It's a lot.
It is.
88.
88.
Felony counts.
Across four separate investigations.
And to really let that sink in here, he's already been convicted of 34 of those.
Convicted felon.
Yeah.
Former U.S. president. That's historic. It really is. I mean, no former U.S. president has ever been convicted of, any crime, let alone this many felonies.
Right.
So it really raises some questions, about accountability, the rule of law, what does this mean for future presidents?
It's a big deal.
It's huge.
Let's start with the one that, I feel like everybody kind of remembers, the New York hush money case. It all seems so, I don't know, tabloidy at first.
It did.
Hush money payment, adult film star, presidential election, But what was it about this case that really got him in hot water, legally?
Yeah, it did have those salacious details. But, at its core, this case really highlights how, personal matters, they can turn into these really serious legal issues, especially when you're talking about campaign finance laws. Prosecutors, they were able to show that this hush money payment, well, it was made to influence the election, right? And they really meticulously connected it to falsified business records to make it a felony.
So it wasn't just the payment, it was they tied it to this whole other thing.
Exactly. They categorized it in a way that made it legally a much bigger deal.
Gotcha.
And that's ultimately what led to the conviction, which, I think it's safe to say it's a huge moment in American legal history.
Okay, so next up we've got the federal classified documents case. Now, we know he took those classified documents with him when he left office, but what makes that a legal issue?
Well, right, just possessing classified documents, that's not automatically illegal, especially for a former president.
Right.
But what transformed this whole thing into a legal battle, it's what he did after, the feds, after investigators asked for these documents back.
They wanted them back.
Yeah. The indictment basically suggests that, he went to great lengths to obstruct this whole investigation, maybe even hiding documents from his own lawyers.
That's not a good look. And didn't they say they have recordings of him, bragging about having these documents and admitting he didn't declassify them?
Yeah, those alleged recordings, they're huge. Because Trump's whole defense, it relies on the argument that he declassified everything before leaving office. But if those recordings are real, authentic, and they're allowed as evidence, that whole strategy could fall apart.
Wow. Okay, so we've got two massive legal battles already.
2 down.
But wait, there's more.
Oh, there's more.
Tell me about the federal January 6th case. I remember watching all that unfold. That was a scary day.
It was a dark day, yeah. And a lot of people are still trying to figure out, what exactly Trump's role was in all of it, in that violence. But in this case, legally speaking, they're focusing on the conspiracy against rights charge, which basically looks at how his actions might have, directly messed with the right to a peaceful transfer of power.
I see. So then we have the Georgia election case. I keep hearing people talk about RICO charges.
RICO, yeah.
That's organized crime stuff, right? Serious stuff.
Yeah, RICO charges are usually, like you said, mob bosses, gangs.
The Godfather.
Exactly, which is why this case is getting so much attention. The DA, Fani Willis, she's even called, what Trump and his allies allegedly did. She called it a criminal enterprise designed to, mess with the election results, change the results in Georgia. So it goes way beyond just one person's actions. It's about a whole group, potentially working together to really undermine the whole system.
Wow. It's a lot, all these charges, these potential recordings, and now we're talking organized crime.
It is a lot. It's a lot to unpack, but it's if we really want to get this, to understand the full scope of his legal situation, we got to look at all of it. And then, this is just like you said, the criminal charges. There are tons of civil cases against Trump, too.
Oh, we'll get to those. But first, to really understand this guy, we need to go back further, right? Back to his roots, how he built his empire.
Yeah, we got to go back to the beginning, back to the 1980s. That's where we start seeing those patterns, the way he does business. Even today.
Okay, so let's rewind.
Let's do it.
Back to the 80s.
Back to the 80s.
So this $20 million tax abatement he got for Trump Tower back in 81. Fifth Avenue, though, right? That's not exactly what I picture when I hear underutilized area.
Right, that's the thing. That tax break was like meant for developers who were, trying to revitalize struggling areas, not prime real estate. But, Trump, he still went for it.
He did. And this Salon article, it really gets into how he worked the system. Like his lawyer, Roy Cohn, this political guy, Stanley Friedman, seems like they knew exactly which judges would be um, favorable to their cases.
It really shows how, like, power and connections, they can be used. Even if it bends the rules a little. There's this great quote in the article, too. They quote a reporter talking about the judge.
Oh, yeah.
And he says, "You didn't have to bribe Blangiardo. He was a hat, happy to do the bidding of the political bosses."
Wow. So even way back then, it seems like Trump was already figuring out how to play the game. And it wasn't just the legal system either. He really knew how to use the media. Like he'd file these lawsuits, sometimes they seem totally frivolous, just to get headlines, boost his image.
Yeah, he understood that attention, even bad attention, it could be good for him. Kept him in the public eye, built this whole aura of controversy, became part of his brand.
It's true. And these tactics, they haven't exactly gone away. I mean, 2022, the Trump Organization, they were fined $1.6 million for tax fraud.
Right, helping executives dodge taxes on like perks, luxury apartments, cars, all that. And there's this quote from one of the prosecutors in the AP article about it. He straight up said, "Mr. Trump is explicitly sanctioning tax fraud, not just creative accounting. This seemed like deliberate."
Wow. It really does kind of show his approach to business. Always pushing those boundaries, always looking for a way to work the system to his advantage. Which kind of brings us to another area where he seemed to be pushing the limits, his foreign business dealings while he was president.
Right. I mean, Crew, they're a nonpartisan ethics watchdog group. They dug into his tax returns, and they found he made up to $160 million from foreign countries while he was president.
And he said he was putting all that on pause while he was in office, right? So was it a hollow promise, or was he, deliberately misleading everyone?
Yeah, it raises all these questions about conflicts of interest. Was he putting his own financial gain ahead of the country's? There are so many examples. Deals with the Saudis, that hotel of his in Turkey, business ties in China. It's a lot.
It's a lot to keep track of. But okay, we've talked about the legal battles, the business, but what about Trump, the man? What about his personal conduct?
Yeah, well, that's where things get even more complicated, but we got to talk about it. And I think one of the most serious allegations against him is that rape accusation from Ivana, his first wife.
Right, from her divorce deposition back in 1990, the Jane Mayer article goes into it. It's a tough topic, for sure.
It is. And Ivana, she did later clarify that she didn't mean rape in, like, the strict legal sense, but she said she felt violated during the incident. It's complicated. But the fact that she even used that word initially, I mean, I think that says something.
And, during those same divorce proceedings, Trump pleaded the Fifth Amendment over 100 times when they asked him about affairs. So there's a pattern there.
For sure. And this accusation, even with all the complexities, it does kind of fit into this larger pattern of behavior that many would call misogynistic. The Access Hollywood tape, where he's bragging about grabbing women without their consent. It's tough to square that with, any claims that he respects women.
It is. And the other thing that gets me is just like the lack of remorse. Even the judge in the New York civil fraud case, she said Trump had a complete lack of contrition and remorse and that it borders on pathological. What's that about? Arrogance? Or is it a strategy?
Yeah, it's really interesting psychologically. I mean, maybe it's just this like deeply ingrained belief that he's always right, that he's above the rules. Maybe it's a way to protect himself, his ego, so he doesn't have to admit any fault. Or, maybe it's something he picked up from Roy Cohn, his mentor. That's where the film The Apprentice comes in.
Right. Roy Cohn, the lawyer. Super aggressive tactics, win at all costs mentality.
Exactly. And the film, it portrays him as like really cynical, really manipulative. Like he basically teaches Trump this whole set of like Machiavellian principles: attack, deny, never admit defeat. It really suggests that those tactics became like central to how Trump approaches, well, everything.
And it's kind of wild how those lessons, it seems like they stayed with him throughout his career. That scene too, where he gives Cohn those fake diamond cufflinks. And Cohn's dying from age-related complications.
It's a powerful image. It says a lot about their relationship. Even with Cohn's reputation, his illness, Trump stuck by him. Makes you wonder what Cohn saw in Trump, And how much did Cohn shape the man we see today?
So the legal battles, the business stuff, these allegations of, misconduct, and then this mentor figure who taught him this very specific way of looking at the world, it's a lot. But it's starting to paint a picture, right? Who Trump is, how he operates, and honestly, why he's been so successful even with all the controversy.
It's fascinating and, yeah, odd and unsettling. But to really get his impact on America, I think we have to understand all of these parts of his story. It goes way beyond his policies, his presidency. It's about him and what made him who he is.
Wow, we've really spent like a lot of time digging into Donald Trump. All the legal stuff, the business dealings. It's been quite the journey. I'm still like wrapping my head around it all, honestly.
Yeah, no, it is a lot to process. I mean, we've covered his early days, New York real estate, the White House years, all the legal stuff, the business practices, even Roy Cohn.
And even Roy Cohn, yeah. Complicated guy. But what's the big takeaway here? What have we learned from this whole deep dive into the world of Donald Trump?
I think for me, what really stands out is how consistent his behavior has been over decades. I mean, in business and his personal life and politics, there's this pattern of pushing boundaries, finding loopholes, operating in this gray area between what's legal and what's ethical.
Always testing the limits.
Yeah. And what's even more, I don't know, fascinating, I guess, is that even when he gets caught, he almost never admits he did anything wrong. He just deflects, attacks, changes the subject. It's like he's created his own reality where the rules, well, they don't apply to him.
That's what's so wild to me. I mean, he's been incredibly successful in business, in politics, even with all this baggage.
And that brings up a really important question, right? Is Trump just smarter than everyone else, or does he represent some kind of failure? Do our institutions, can they even hold powerful people accountable? Because his success with all the controversies, I think it makes us look at our own values. Are we really a society that rewards, I don't know, merit? Or do we just tolerate anyone with enough money and power?
It's a scary thought. His whole story kind of challenges this idea of a level playing field. And you know what? We haven't even touched on his relationship with the Republican Party.
That's a whole other deep dive. I mean, he's really changed the GOP. But how has the party changed him? What does their relationship tell us about, I don't know, the future of the Republican Party or conservatism in America?
Yeah, those are some big questions, but I think we've definitely given our listeners plenty to chew on for now. So after all this, do you think Trump's actions are just like business as usual, or are they something more? What does his story say about power, ambition, even the American dream?
It's something to think about, yeah. But I think one thing's for sure. To understand America today, you kind of have to understand Donald Trump. He's this reflection of, well, both our hopes and our fears,
That's a great way to put it. This has been, well, a fascinating deep dive and, sometimes unsettling, I'll be honest. But I think that's kind of what we do here, right? We explore those tough topics, we challenge assumptions, and hopefully our listeners walk away, ready to think critically about the world.
Absolutely. The conversation doesn't end here. Keep asking those questions, keep learning, and, most importantly, keep diving deep.
Could have said it better myself. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive. And to all our listeners out there, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.